The moment a boundary becomes real, someone may test it. That testing can come from other people, but it can also come from inside you. Anger, guilt, fear, grief, loneliness, old loyalty, spiritual anxiety, and plain habit may all rise up and ask the same question. Are you really allowed to change? Welcome back to this summary of boundaries. In this episode, we cover boundaries in God, then the resistance that appears when people begin developing healthy limits. The chapter on God can surprise readers because many people assume boundaries with God must be disrespectful. Cloud and Townsend frame it differently. They argue that real relationship with God includes honesty, freedom, response, and love. God is not interested in robotic compliance. Love that is forced is not love. The authors point out that God gives commands, but also allows human beings to choose. God permits consequences. God says no. God respects human choice enough to let people experience the results of that choice. In their framework, this means boundaries are not foreign to spiritual life. They reflect something about the structure of relationship itself. They also address the person who feels angry, disappointed, or confused with God. Some people think spiritual maturity means pretending those feelings do not exist. Boundaries argues for honesty. A real relationship can bring truth into the open. Prayer can include protest, grief, questions, and desire. The point is not to control God. The point is to relate truthfully. There is also a subtle boundary issue in how people use God language with each other. Someone may say, God told me you should help me. Or, a good Christian would not say no. Or, if you had more faith, you would keep giving. The book's framework pushes back against that kind of spiritual pressure. A person's relationship with God should not become a tool for another person's control. At the same time, boundaries with God do not mean avoiding surrender, service, sacrifice, or obedience. Cloud and Townsend are not promoting a faith built around personal comfort. They're saying that mature faith includes freedom and truth. A resentful yes offered under compulsion is spiritually different from a costly yes offered freely. Then the book turns to resistance. This is where many boundary journeys get difficult. A person reads the principles, feels hope, tries one honest limit, and immediately discovers that the old system liked the old arrangement. External resistance can come as anger. Someone who benefited from your lack of boundaries may accuse you of being selfish, cold, rebellious, ungrateful, or changed in a bad way. Their anger may feel like proof that you did something wrong. The book says anger is information, not a verdict. It may simply mean the old pattern has been disturbed. Resistance can come as guilt messages. A parent sighs. A friend becomes wounded. A spouse says, "After all I have done for you." A church member questions your character. A co-worker acts abandoned. The boundary beginner is tempted to rush back and repair the discomfort. But if guilt has been the control system, guilt will often be the first weapon used against change. Resistance can come through consequences. Sometimes a boundary reveals that a relationship was more conditional than you hoped. The person may withdraw. The invitation may disappear. The conflict may intensify. The book does not sugarcoat this. Boundaries can cost something, especially when they interrupt a long-standing imbalance. There is also internal resistance. A person may feel afraid of being alone. They may fear success, because success requires a new identity. They may grieve the fantasy that someone else will finally change first. They may have to face their own envy, passivity, or avoidance. Setting boundaries with others often exposes places where the self also needs growth. Cloud and Townsend emphasize the need for support. Boundary development is not meant to be a solo heroic performance. People need safe relationships, wise counsel, practice, and encouragement. A person who has never said, "No" may need other people nearby, while learning to tolerate disapproval. They also distinguish forgiveness from trust. Forgiveness deals with the past debt. Trust deals with present patterns and future access. A person can forgive and still maintain a boundary. Forgiveness does not require pretending that nothing happened, nor does it automatically restore the same level of access. This distinction is crucial because many people collapse forgiveness into immediate reconciliation. The book argues that reconciliation requires more than one person's forgiveness. It requires truth, repentance, changed behavior, and rebuilt trust. A boundary can be the truthful space in which that process is tested. Another kind of resistance is pain itself. When you stop rescuing others, you may have to watch them struggle. When you stop overfunctioning, something may remain unfinished. When you stop managing everyone's feelings, someone may stay disappointed. This can feel unbearable at first, but the authors keep returning to reality. If a person is never allowed to face the results of their choices, growth is interrupted. Boundary growth also requires grieving. You may grieve the family you wished you had. You may grieve years spent pleasing. You may grieve the discovery that some people like your compliance more than your personhood. Grief is not failure. It is part of leaving illusion and entering truth. What keeps this chapter from becoming harsh is the book's insistence that boundaries are for love. The purpose is not to punish everyone who ever asks too much. The purpose is to become capable of genuine relationship. A person who can say no without hatred can also say yes without resentment. The spiritual thread of this episode is freedom. Cloud and Townsend believe love must be freely chosen. That means people must be allowed to choose badly, experience consequences, tell the truth, and change over time. Forced goodness may preserve appearances, but it cannot produce mature love. So when resistance arrives, the boundary question is not only, how do I make the other person stop reacting? The better question is, what belongs to me right now? My clarity belongs to me. My tone belongs to me. My follow-through belongs to me. My need for support belongs to me. The other person's response belongs to them. Thank you for listening to this 5th episode. In the final part, we look at how the book measures success and returns to daily life, showing what changes when boundaries are no longer just an idea, but a practiced way of living. Final close. Resistance does not always mean the boundary is wrong. Sometimes it means the boundary has finally become visible. The God chapter also addresses a hidden fear. If I have boundaries, will I become less available to God? Cloud and Townsend answer by separating surrender from people-pleasing. Surrender to God is not the same as surrender to every demand made in God's name. Spiritual maturity requires discernment. This matters because religious communities can be beautiful places of service, but they can also become places where guilt language hides unhealthy pressure. A need is announced. A person feels responsible, and no one asks whether the yes is free, wise, or sustainable. The book invites faith communities to honor both service and limits. Resistance is predictable because boundaries change the economy of a relationship. If someone has been receiving unlimited emotional labor, money, time, rescue, or compliance, a new limit feels like loss. They may call the limit selfish because, from their perspective, it removes a benefit. That does not settle the moral question. The authors also show that anger is not always the enemy. For someone who has been compliant for years, anger may be the first signal that the self still exists. But anger must mature. It can wake a person up, but it cannot guide the whole journey. Eventually, the person must move from reactive anger to proactive choice. Guilt is another form of resistance. Some guilt is healthy because it tells us when we have done wrong. But much guilt is learned control. It appears when we have merely disappointed someone, changed a pattern, or stopped carrying a load that was never ours. Boundary growth requires learning the difference. Fear of loneliness may be the deepest resistance. If I set a boundary, will anyone stay? The book does not offer fake guarantees. Instead, it points toward building a support system of people who can handle truth. Boundary growth often requires new community because the old system may not be able to support the new self. Forgiveness and trust are crucial here. A person may forgive a harm and still say, "Access will be different until trust is rebuilt." That is not bitterness. It is wisdom. Trust is built by trustworthy behavior over time, not by pressure, apology alone, or the wounded person's desire to make the tension disappear. The resistance chapters are realistic because they admit that truth can create short-term disruption. But the alternative is not peace. The alternative is the old pain continuing under a nicer name. Boundaries may disturb false peace, so real peace has a chance.